Good morning and welcome to this video study from Fear to Faith, in which we look at Exodus chapter 14 verses 10 to 12 and the ways in which we can find insights here about the challenges of fear and terror that can arise when we face a difficulty in life and the hope that we have as we place our faith in God. Exodus chapter 14 verses 10, 11, 12 captures a pivotal moment in the journey of the Israelites as they travel from Egypt under Moses' leadership towards the promised land. And as they look back, they see the challenge of the Egyptian army marching towards them. And I'm reminded that there can be many stages in life in which we are hoping to move forward. We have hope and a sense of promise and victory lying ahead for us. And then we face a challenge in the life journey, which causes us to wonder about God's presence in the midst of the difficulties that we face. This story is really well told, in that it begins to explore some of the challenges that are faced in life's journey. In Exodus 14, we read that the king of Egypt was told that the people had fled, and Pharaoh and his officials set out after the people, and they hopped on their chariots and they charged towards them. And as the people looked back, they could see the enemy army approaching. This reminds us that in life's challenges, we can look at the difficulties that are being faced, and we can at times feel very fearful, and rightly so, in that there are difficulties that we face in life. But as we move on, we see that Moses provides hope and encouragement to move forward with faith in God. And so in this passage, we're reminded of the challenges that are faced, and the way in which taking time to converse with other good people who we trust is able to encourage us to press forward in hope and anticipation of a better world, better life that lies ahead. It's not wrong to have fear and doubt at times, but we can choose whether we continue to look back with fear and doubt or whether we lift our vision with hope to look forward to the better possibilities that lie ahead of us. Many of the experiences that we read about here in Exodus 14 and 15 resonate with our lived experiences, where the challenges of life in difficult circumstance, or even in relationships, or in the crisis that we may face at times, bring a sense of fear and bring a sense of imagining better times in the past that we would hope that we could go back to, even though others may describe these as times of captivity or enslavement. And so the alcoholic who's challenged to leave behind that which has trapped him and brought difficulty can at times feel that he could tell a better past that was more comfortable and would be attractive to go back to, forgetting the hope that lies ahead of him. The complaint in verse 11 and 12, was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us here to die, is the way some people feel when they face a difficult challenge in life. Fear can be overwhelming and it can grow, and a failure to understand aspects of fear can lead us to act in deleterious ways. Fear such as that felt by the Israelites at this time was not just emotional. It connected with the core foundational beliefs of the ordered nature where God is in charge of the universe. At its core, it was theological. It was about how much we trust and understand God, how much we understand who God is and his love and concern for us in the midst of difficulties. It's easy in the midst of difficulties to say, where is God? And to feel alone and deserted. We can even feel alone and deserted by relationships with others as we face challenges ahead. I encourage you at times like this to get in touch with others who you know care about you, and also to get in touch with God through prayer and worship so as to re-establish the relationships that can carry you through these difficult times. Brevett Childs observes that this moment in Exodus illustrates the depth of a person's inability to believe in the midst of difficult circumstance or challenges that we face. And there may have been a crisis in your life or in mine where we've wondered, where is God? And we felt that our faith is very small. But to turn back to those things that have held us captive in the past at this time can in fact bring us into greater danger and loss, even though it might bring a sense of security with the comforts of the past. I'm reminded of a mother who had lost a child and they felt they could never recover. And yet another parent that one spoke to also spoke about losing a child and went through a challenge of wrestling, where is God, only to find a deeper understanding of the nature of God and the way he acts and his love and compassion and care to carry her through. And so today's lesson asks the question, what is the difference between that faith which loses all hope and abandons hope and goes back into slavery and difficult circumstance, and that hope which presses through the difficulty, even though God at times seems absent, only to find a deeper understanding of God and his ways? Nicholas Wolstenstoff said, the experience of dislocation and disconnection within our inner being and heart can often overwhelm us and overwhelm that framework that we have for looking at and understanding the world and God and his work in the world. But this very shattering of a weak framework can be the very beneficial need that we have for developing a stronger framework for understanding the world and understanding God. You can find out more by reading Wolstenstoff's book, Lament for a Son. This disconnection and breakdown of a previously held belief system can lead us to abandon all belief and to lose faith in God altogether, or it can lead us to think more deeply and find a deeper understanding of God and his relationship with others. For some, God in times like this difficulty may appear impotent or cruel, but others may find at this very time a rediscovery of the depth and nature of God that can cause them to grow. John Swinton says that traditional understandings about God and how he is working in a world where there is evil often present can fail to provide and meet the needs of grieving people, as we often share very general abstract justifications as to why difficulties come along without reminding people of the presence of others and the presence of a caring God and the depth of meaning that can be found through times of suffering. See John Swinton's book, Raging with Compassion. Those who find opportunity to express the rawness of their pain, to wrestle through their sense of loss and grief, and to begin to explore more deeply a sense of meaning and purpose that may be found in this mysterious understanding of what's going on, find that there are less transactional views of God where you could bargain with God and ask simple questions, but rather seek to understand a deeper understanding of the nature of God and his purposes for us, even in the midst of difficulties that we face. We could find much more by reading tragedy such as Job, chapters 38 to 42 in particular. Psychologists suggest that the ways people of faith respond to tragedy and it reflects the ways in which they view God and their relationship and attachment to him and to others and to other things in this world. Attachment patterns develop during the life journey, and sometimes they're superficial and weak in their framing and understanding, in which we see God like Santa Claus, who just simply blesses and gives good things, and we fail to understand that life has complexities. Sin does abound in many different places and relationships, and we fail to understand that there are difficulties that emerge all around us. Life can be difficult. But through the challenges of loss and pain, we can better understand the nature of the life journey and the character of God who journeys with us and shares his love, care, and concern with us on this journey. A person with a secure and well-developed relational history with others and with God can experience God as a source of comfort in times of great loss and tragedy, even times where God appears silent, even times when their understanding of God appears difficult to follow, even at times when hurts and a sense of God's abandonment feels very real. When experiencing times of loss and grief, our spiritual attachments to God's and others and things is challenged and tested. And our different backgrounds bring different ways in which we seek to wrestle through and find answers to this time. But at the same time, this testing can encourage us to dig deeper and find a deeper relationship with God and a deeper understanding of the world around us. Our faith journey is often like a storytelling, and embedded in these stories we tell ourselves is an opportunity to tell a positive story where good things can work out, even at times when our story of our life appears shattered and challenged by the difficulties of life. Psychologists such as Dan McAdams and theologians like James Fowler suggest that we construct stories that can either help us make sense of life, even when they're pushed around and shattered by the events of life, or we can abandon all hope in life making sense and the story making sense. Belief in God need not be viewed as a crutch in a story, but rather as a way of connecting to the source of meaning, order, and beauty in the world, even at times when this order and beauty is challenged by the events of life itself. While some see the challenges of faith as a reason to abandon hope and faith, others see these challenges as an opportunity to reconstruct life narratives in a deeper, more real way, to more fully understand the nature of faith, the nature of loss and suffering, the nature of the world around us, and the nature of encounter with God and the character of God himself, who seeks to journey with us in life's travels. In his book, The End of Memory, the theologian Miroslav Volf says that suffering should not be viewed as the absence of God or a failure of God to step in and bring only good into our lives, but rather the space in which God has given us to live and grow and face the challenges that life brings. And while suffering is a reality, it's not evidence of God's absence so much as evidence of the space that God has created for us to be free to live, and a space in which God can step in with comfort as he journeys with us, as he suffers with us and alongside us, as we read about in the Easter story where Jesus goes to the cross for us and with us. Suffering should not be seen as a proof of God's absence or disinterest, but rather an opportunity to invite God in to journey with us. We can choose what to remember about these events, and eventually these memories can change over time. We can choose what we bring into our memories, either increased dark views that bring greater difficulty or a sense of light that brings hope. Miroslav Volf challenges us and encourages us to discern what kind of remembering is worthy of being shared in our life and in our relationships with others and God, in order to bring growth and prospering, rather than festering hurt that can bring decay and destruction. Communal support at times of suffering and grieving is particularly important. And we're reminded in the Psalms of Lament and in Lamentations that expressing our grief can be particularly valuable, particularly when it's faced and followed by a sense of hope that leads us out of the place of grief towards a place of hope for the future. Nancy Iceland, who worked with people with disability and suffering, said, "We need to develop robust frameworks that acknowledge the brokenness that's around us if we're able to move on to a brighter life that's ahead of us." So lament and protest and expression of our fear and our difficulties, such as we read about in Exodus 14, and as we experience many times in our own lives, can help us recognize the value of laying out on the table our feelings and concerns about the difficulties we face. And then, with the help of others that we trust, we can begin to reframe our view of what's happening and begin to see the positive hopes that are before us. It's good to remind ourselves that when one door closes or one difficulty arises, there can be dozens of doors, if not hundreds of doors, of fresh opportunity ahead in the future for us. These verses remind us that God is actively at work in this world in order to carry us through our difficulties into better hope in the future. Sociologically, this passage in Exodus 14 reveals the difficulty of change in our identity as we leave less mature ways of thinking and being behind and move on into greater freedom that lies ahead. The Israelites were comfortable in their captivity in Egypt, and it was fearful to move into a new environment and to progress forward as a liberated people who would now have to form their ways of thinking, behaving, and being and relating. This has often been referred to by social theorists as a liminal crisis, like the frame around a door through which we step into a new space with which we're not yet familiar. And throughout life journey, there are many liminal moments when we step from one space into another, and each can be filled with fearful anticipation as well as hope, and often hopes are not quite as bright as we think, and fears not as great as we think, but there are opportunities that lie ahead, even as we step out of difficulties into other opportunities that are before us. Psychologically, the Israelites' behavior exemplified the common human pattern of looking back and seeking to go back when we face uncertain freedoms of the future. Often we can feel anger and anxiety, and there's a danger that we can direct this anger and anxiety towards others. And here in Exodus 14, Moses is made the scapegoat. Moses, you did this. We need to be careful at times like this, not to be blaming others and not even to be blaming self, but recognize there can be many complex reasons for the difficulties that arise in life. And so, if a loved one passes, there can be many reasons why the death came about, the loss came about. It's not helpful at times to be shifting blame, though there is need to think about what are some of the causes. What is helpful is to know that there are people travelling alongside, people who've been through challenges and tragedies themselves, who are able to travel with us, and that God himself is one who has been through tragedy and suffering, who seeks to journey with us towards better hope in the future. The enduring power of a passage like Exodus chapter 14 to 12 lies in its honesty about the fears that are faced when we see enemies marching towards us and the future doesn't appear as easy as we first thought. Exodus 14 is more than a transitional moment in a story. It's a reflection on human conditions which expose the fragility of faith, the complexity of freedom, and the challenge of trusting when the promise of the future has not yet been fulfilled. And this passage invites us to reflect on times in our own life journey when we've been tempted to not press on in hope, but to withdraw in fear rather than push forward in anticipation of a brighter future. Jewish thinkers like Abraham Herschel have said that a passage like this reminds us that spirituality and God give us space to wrestle and to complain, but in ways that reflect spiritual honesty and work through to a resolution and a deeper understanding of the nature of who we are, what the world around us is, who others are, so that we can honestly move forward, being comforted by the realization that we have a good God, caring and loving, traveling with us in life's journey. In Paul's discussion in Romans 7, we're reminded that this can be like a struggle between the old nature with its weaknesses and the new nature where the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, and hope come flowing into our lives. Walter Brueggemann, the Old Testament scholar, highlights that faith is not the absence of fear, but it's recognition and more fully understanding fear and the ways in which trusting God helps us to better understand reasons for our fear and our need for God to help us journey forward. Exodus is also foundational in liberation theology, which reminds us that many people in many areas of the world today have that sense of captivity, and that this passage speaks to them of the hope and liberation that they are seeking to go forward into. And this reminds us that all of us have those things that take us captive and hold us back, and that we can all benefit from knowing the liberation, such as that which Moses talks about here in Exodus chapter 14. Liberation theologians remind us of Moses' role here as leaders who are able to understand and identify with the fear that people have, but to lift them beyond their fear in hope, not a false hope, but a hope that is able to carry them through. Many other biblical scholars have written about this critical moment in Exodus 14, such as Terence Freetham, who talks about the recognition of the divine-human relationship that can be challenged by difficulties but restored by faith. Carol Myers, in her commentary on Exodus, reminds us that community can be particularly important at times like this. And Michael Walzer in Exodus and Revolution reminds us that revolutionary change requires this understanding of the freedom that we're able to enter into and overcoming the disorientation that causes people to turn back from the freedom that they have in the future. In application of Exodus 14 to our own lives, we're reminded that formation of our spiritual character and our faith dynamics can be encouraged through times of challenge when we allow God to bring a deeper understanding of ourselves, our world around us, the challenges that we face, and the hope that we find in God. Exodus 14 is an honest expression of prayer and lament that's followed by answers that are found in God Himself. It's a reminder that leaders often feel the burden when others do not have faith to continue forward. It's a reminder that there are psychological reasons for people wanting to retreat from the hope of the future and push back towards the past. It's a reminder that courage is needed, moral courage, ethical courage, that helps not only ourselves but others push forward towards the better life that is awaiting for us. So let's be encouraged through reflecting on this passage to push through to a better hope that we have through faith in God in the midst of difficulties that we can at times face, even in life's journey. A particularly useful insight was found from Erich Fromm's theory of fear and its relationship to the Exodus narrative. And so Erich Fromm in this passage speaks to us of the way in which we can go forward into a better hope and better life that lies ahead. The biblical narrative Exodus provides a dramatic presentation of what it means to be liberated from that which holds us back and to move forward into the hope that lies before us, to be truly liberated and to be truly saved. Often, as Fromm points out, we have deep fears within that hold us back from the fullness of life that God is calling us to. Fromm calls this existential fear. And he describes this as the paradox of freedom in the need to confront and deal with these causes and sources of fear that can hold us back. And he identifies these of authoritarianism, that is, a tendency to look to authorities that over restrict us and prevent us from growing and taking on responsibility for our own journey. He also sees an escape mechanism in self-destruction, where we actually destroy our own opportunities for the future, and conformity, where we conform to those things and expectations that limit us and restrict us from the freedom that God has provided for us. Fromm writes, the more an individual loses himself in the world, the more he's freed from choice, the more he escapes into loneliness and anxiety. He removes the challenge of the future, but he brings himself into slavery of the past, of authoritarianism, self-destruction, conformity, the expectations of others that limit our growth and limit our becoming the people we've been called to be. So this journey from captivity is described by Fromm as like the journey that we face each day and each year as we seek to be free from limiting expectations on our own life, as we seek to move into the higher possibilities of who we might be and what we might say and see and do. This journey of Israelite through the wilderness is a journey that can be likened to our own journey, where we leave behind those things that hold us captive and we enter into the freedom that we have. In a similar way, the Apostle Paul in Romans describes this journey from captivity and sin into freedom and hope, reaching a climax in Romans chapter 8, where the Spirit of God brings God's very character into our lives, transforming and changing us into the people he's called us to be. This time of journey through the wilderness can be a time of identity reconstruction, and we may resist this change that can come about as God journeys with us, or we may allow God to rebuild our sense of understanding of the world around us and ourselves and who we are and others. It's a challenging time of letting go of certain views about ourselves and others in the world, letting go of fear and self-doubt and dependency, and expecting and accepting responsibility for who one is, for one's choices and one's future. It has risks, the risk of the unknown, but it brings about the benefit of authentic selfhood, authentic relationship with self, others, and with God, the divine. So when the law is given, the Torah at Sinai, it's not simply a description of do not do these things, which are like white lines on the edge of the road, but rather it's a description of the very character of God that he wants to outwork in our lives. Rather than saying, do not lie, the character of God is be truthful, make truth a core part of who you are. Rather than do not steal, make generosity a core part of who you are. Rather than do not covet, make a generous heart and attitude core part of who you are. Sabbath, make rest a core part of who you are, as well as working hard when you're called to work hard. Recognize that balance is needed in all of these areas of life. This passage reminds us that spiritual formation is about leaving behind those things that bring fear and resistance to change as we move forward to become more fully the people we're called to be. It's a reminder that we need to journey from external compliance to expectations of others and comfort to internal trust in who God is calling us to be and who God is. It's a reminder that we need social change in the nature of the communities around us so that they don't oppress and enslave one another, but rather provide freedom for one another to become our different selves in different expressions of what God has called us to be. It's a reminder of the need for leadership and change that brings us forward into a hope-filled future. Fromm's theory of existential fear reminds us that we each have deep fears that can hold us back from freedom and hope that God has for us. Similarly, John Levinson's Sinai and Zion reminds us that our liturgical practices and habits can either help us move forward into the better hope of the future, or they can take us back into the liturgical reenactments of Egypt that can hold us captive. Our habits and practices can determine our future, or they can hold us back into the past. And sometimes we need to develop new habits and practices. And in the New Testament, we read about how Jesus and the disciples move forward with new habits and practices that help them to be renewed and move forward. And we too can benefit from these new habits and practices. Worship, singing, prayer, gathering with those that we trust who are able to help us, all of this can help shape our memories, our rituals, our faithfulness, and strength to travel forward. This passage is very powerful in Exodus 14 that we have been reading. It reminds us that often we can be held captive by that which can bring fear, but it concludes with the hope that as God leads and opens up possibilities, we can enter into a brighter future that lies ahead of us. We read how the Lord said to Moses, tell the Israelites, it's time to move on. Raise up your staff, stretch out your hand, and the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord and I will gain glory. The angel of the Lord, who had been traveling, came through the night with a cloud of the presence of God, and the Lord stretched out his hands and the waters were divided. Though the Egyptians were pursuing them, then Moses stretched out his hand and the water flowed back in and the enemy were washed away. As we come to Easter, we're reminded on Good Friday that there are times when we feel hope is lost, but on Sunday, when the tomb is rolled open and the stone is rolled away, we see resurrection hope that there's a brighter future. In the midst of the difficulties that we face, we are to be encouraged here from the conclusion of Exodus 14 that there is a brighter future for us, that as we look to God and his provision, then we can be encouraged that God is opening up hope for each one of us in the brighter future that he has for us. Instead of continuing to look back to the fears of the past, it's important to lift our eyes and see the hope that God provides And though it may take time to leave some of our fears and disappointments behind, in time we will find, if we trust in God and show faith, a better hope that lies for us ahead. Thank you. I've enjoyed sharing with you at this time from Exodus 14, and I look forward to sharing with you further on these insights from the Bible and from Exodus. Thank you, and let's keep in touch.